Social Studies Audit Board Report. Hello, I'm Jessica Ebert, the Director of Curriculum, and I'm joined with our K-12 Social Studies Curriculum Coordinator, Laura Fowle, and our Social Studies Auditor, Dr. Melissa Gibson. Dr. Gibson conducted the study of our current state of K-12 social studies in the Wauwatosa School District. We will hear from Dr. Gibson shortly. In alignment with Policy 2210, which outlines the curriculum development process, and as part of our strategic plan objective 1.1, an audit of current social studies K-12 curriculum instruction and assessment practices was completed during the fall of 2023. The aim of this report is to provide an update to the Board of Education and the community on the findings from the audit, as well as key considerations to improve the future state of K-12 social studies in the Wauwatosa School District. At this time, I will turn it over to Laura Fowle for a further introduction and to get us started with an overview of the audit process.
Hello, my name is Laura Fowle, and I serve in the role of K-12 Social Studies Curriculum Coordinator. I was hired here in Wauwatosa in the spring of 2022. Prior to this role, I have served in various roles within the Whitnall School District, including Curriculum Coordinator, Instructional Coach, and Dean of Students. Prior to my experience in the Whitnall School District, I taught both English Language Arts and Social Studies in both the Franklin Public and Muskego Norway School Districts. In collaboration with Jessica Ebert, Director of Curriculum, and our auditor, Dr. Melissa Gibson, and outlined in Policy 2210, we developed a multifaceted data collection process modeled off of previous district audits in order to build a comprehensive understanding of social studies in the Wauwatosa School District. This study engaged all stakeholders from the elementary, middle, and high school levels, including staff, students, and families throughout the community. Opportunities to engage included in-person classroom observations, targeted focus groups held both in person and via Zoom, and extensive surveys of all stakeholder groups. A final report was developed in response to this evaluation of current practices. In addition, key considerations and recommendations have been identified in response to research, standards, and the vision of social studies in the state of Wisconsin. We look forward to sharing this information.
Hi, I am Dr. Melissa Gibson, an associate professor in the College of Education at Marquette University, where I oversee our social studies education programming, and I also oversee the Milwaukee Roots Project, which is a Department of Education funded program for improving history and civics education in Milwaukee County. My scholarly expertise is in the area of equity and social studies education, as well as how we effectively educate young people for democratic citizenship. In addition to my research and teaching at the university, I have worked with area school districts like the Econo-Milwaukee Area School District and the Archdiocese of Milwaukee to improve social studies instruction and equity in the classroom. I've been at Marquette since 2015. And prior to that, I was a middle and high school English and social studies teacher in a wide range of settings that included Chicago Public Schools, Waunakee, Wisconsin, and Guadalajara, Mexico. I want to begin my report by introducing the evidence-backed framework that is driving change in social studies instruction nationally. In 2010, the National Council for the Social Studies released its C3 framework for college, career, and civic readiness, which was a new approach to national curriculum standards for social studies that focused on disciplinary thinking rather than content coverage. In consultation with diverse civic educational stakeholders and rooted in the cutting edge of pedagogical research, NCSS offered the C3 framework as a way to navigate beyond the social studies wars that had politicized curriculum content beyond the possibility of national standards. They also wanted to provide a vision for increasing the rigor of social studies instruction beyond the memorization of facts. And they wanted to offer broadly applicable instructional guidance rooted in the multiple purposes of social studies education. While public discourse around schooling often talks about college and career readiness, with the C3 framework, NCSS also foregrounded civic readiness, or the education of America's young people to participate in democratic governance and healthy civic communities. The C3 framework is rooted in this understanding of education for democratic citizenship, and it brings these goals into the 21st century with an emphasis on inquiry and sense-making. In 2018, the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction built its own state-specific approach to the C3 framework through its revised social studies standards. Rather than offering a prescriptive document, DPI followed research evidence by providing a framework for disciplinary thinking that could be adapted to the unique contexts of local districts. Embedded within this shift in Wisconsin is the vision for the Wisconsin Social Studies, which was written in 2015, preceding the standards, by the state superintendent's K-12 Social Studies Advisory Committee. This vision states that Wisconsin students will become civically engaged problem solvers who critically examine their roles in local, regional, state, national, and global communities. Through the study and application of the individual disciplines of social studies, the behavioral sciences, economics, geography, history, political science, students become lifelong learners, able to collaborate and thrive in our interdependent world. At the heart of the framework, both in the Wisconsin standards and the broader C3 framework, therefore, at the heart of preparing students effectively and equitably for college, career, and civic readiness, is the inquiry arc, which is a shift away from how many of us experience our own social studies instruction K-12. Rather than emphasizing the memorization of facts, the inquiry arc is a structured process of teaching students how to ask meaningful questions, how to identify and evaluate evidence, how to apply disciplinary thinking, and how to engage publicly based on one's conclusions. The inquiry arc can be applied to any of the social studies disciplines and to any topic. It is, in other words, a comprehensive curricular framework. Let's now move on to the audit findings. In general, stakeholders identify some consistent strengths within Wauwatosa's social studies program. Across grades, for example, students report that teachers are effective and purposeful in making connections between curricular content and the broader social world. Students also report feeling that their teachers help them understand why social studies is important and how it can help them make sense of their world. Teachers themselves report a willingness to try student-centered pedagogies, and most also report doing so in line with district benchmarks and other curricular guides. However, there is also broad consensus about where social studies needs to see change moving forward. High school students in particular express a desire for less lecture and note-taking pedagogies and more student-centered inquiry focused on their questions about the world. A variety of stakeholders express concern about what they perceive as minimal attention to history, especially world history, across the K-12 span. And teachers at all levels identify the need for better resources, more classroom support for differentiation, and increased time to plan with colleagues, both within and beyond their buildings. Finally, it is important to note that the political climate, both local and national, has impacted how different stakeholders experience social studies instruction in Wauwatosa. Families express concern over partisan content at both ends, and teachers express concern about feeling supported when they teach content that can be perceived as politicized. It is also worth noting that students did not express the same concerns, and in fact, they want to see more inclusion of the political context. Given that social studies is charged with preparing students for participation as political citizens, this is an important context to acknowledge and work through. Given the themes that emerged from this audit process, I now want to offer the following recommendations, which I've grouped into 6 large categories. 1, aligning the Wauwatosa social studies curriculum with the Wisconsin state standards. 2, careful compliance with state statutes and legislation governing social studies instruction in Wisconsin. 3, remapping the curriculum. 4, prioritizing the development of elementary social studies. 5, prioritizing how the needs of diverse students are met in the social studies. And 6, focus professional development in the social studies. So the first large bucket of recommendations is that Wauwatosa shift its social studies curriculum to align with the Wisconsin state standards. And within this alignment, I recommend a shift within social studies towards inquiry-based instruction, towards the inclusion of the social context in the classroom, and toward the prioritization of evidentiary reasoning. The Wisconsin state standards emphasize disciplinary thinking and student-driven inquiry into disciplinary topics. Aligning to the standards would therefore support a significant shift towards teaching students how to navigate information, how to draw evidence-backed conclusions. It would also encourage curiosity about the world and making powerful connections between school learning and their lives as community members. It's important to note that because the inquiry process teaches students how to think and not what to think, the inquiry process helps students learn to navigate the political and civic world as their own person and as their own thinker. The second broad recommendation is attending to the careful compliance with state statutes and legislation governing social studies instruction. While there are a number of statutes that provide guidance and mandate routinized coverage of topics such as the Holocaust and other genocides, civics, environmental education, you can see them here on the slide, I especially want to call attention to how Act 31, or the instruction in the history, culture, and tribal sovereignty of the federally recognized American Indian tribes and bands of Wisconsin, I want to call attention to how this is addressed in the Wauwatosa schools. The audit revealed little understanding among social studies educators of how this act is currently included in the K-12 curriculum. Therefore, the curriculum revision process must include a clear curriculum map for where and how each statute is met across the grades, specifically how Act 31 is being addressed, as currently the audit makes it seem as if it is not. A recurring theme among all stakeholder groups throughout the audit process was that there was some area of the social studies curriculum that was no longer working, whether that was curricular creep between grade levels, teachers feeling that students coming to their grade are unprepared, or concerns over the content and the subjects that were offered. The audit revealed that there is a need to revisit the social studies curriculum itself, the course pathways, the scope and sequence within grades, etc. To engage in this remapping, I recommend considering the following. 1, the Wisconsin DPI suggested social studies and civic scope and sequence, which was just released in November of 23. This scope and sequence offers a comprehensive approach to social studies instruction K-8, which is centered on meaningful civic learning aligned with the state standards and statutes. Alongside this, however, it will be necessary to re-examine the high school course sequence, which is not included in the DPI scope and sequence. The district should also consider community concerns about a perceived lack of attention to the study of history, especially world history, and a perceived lack of attention to diverse groups' histories, such as might be included in an ethnic studies course. As noted throughout the audit, these are both areas that are currently missing in the current district scope and sequence for social studies. It also must be noted that there is no singular textbook or curricular program that will serve to meet every need of student-centered inquiry. Therefore, I recommend that the district consider C3 resources and the C3 hub as a consistent model and framework for instruction when planning the remapped curriculum. Surveys and focus groups, especially among families and students, commented on the need to incorporate more local context into the social studies curriculum, alongside a need to diversify the curriculum. Effective practices dictate that neither of these be standalone units, but rather integrated into every unit at every grade level. And thus the remapped curriculum should provide connections to the local context and the diversity of people in each unit throughout the curriculum. Finally, to support curricular shifts, the district will need to create high-quality resources from outstanding social studies education services and organizations, in addition to any textbook that might be adopted. It is my understanding that the Department of Academic Performance will be assembling a curricular review team to engage in this work. Fourth, social studies at the elementary grade levels must be a priority moving forward. Frustration over the perceived lack of attention to social studies at the elementary level was confounded in the audit by low participation in surveys, focus groups, and classroom visits by elementary teachers. Families expressed a desire to know more about what their students were learning in social studies at the elementary grades. It must be noted that the lack of attention to social studies in the elementary grades is likely a larger structural problem in the elementary curriculum. And thus, it's not enough to adopt a new curriculum without also attending to these broader structural considerations, such as how instructional minutes are allocated. Moreover, given the multitude of demands on elementary instructional minutes, finding ways to integrate social studies with other areas of instruction is likely going to be necessary. Therefore, some suggestions for prioritizing social studies at the elementary level are to focus on building high-quality text sets involving social studies topics and that support reading and literacy instruction, to involve community work within the school community as social studies instruction, and to practice more transparent communication about what is actually being taught in the elementary grades. Given that the Wauwatosa School District strives to provide equitable access to learning opportunities that empower every student to thrive within an inclusive community, it must be noted that on the most recent state report cards, there still exists disproportionality of outcomes based on race, class, language, and disability. While social studies is not solely charged with eradicating disproportionalities, it can play a role. For example, research has shown that when students feel represented in the curriculum, they also feel more engaged at and invested in school. Engagement and investment, in turn, can produce improved academic outcomes. A variety of stakeholders brought up the need to diversify the curriculum in order to represent more student identity groups. Therefore, I strongly recommend that the curricular revision process in the social studies prioritize meeting diverse students' needs. Within the social studies, that may well look like more attention to a universal design for learning approach, which would be of great benefit to the wide range of diverse learners in the classroom, and is in fact the bedrock for inquiry frameworks like C3 and the Wisconsin standards. Finally, I recommend an intentional focus on the use of professional development time for social studies content and pedagogies. Across the board, teachers desire professional learning specific to their discipline of the social studies, and they desire time, not only to learn, but to collaborate and plan for implementation of evidence-backed practices. Therefore, I recommend focusing attention on 4 areas of professional learning specific to the social studies. One is around inquiry pedagogies, which I've already talked about as being central to these curricular shifts. 2 would be up-to-date content knowledge, providing more opportunities for teachers' own professional learning that would help that they themselves are able to remain students of their discipline and teach the cutting edges of their fields. 3, around special education services and differentiation. Ongoing professional learning around differentiation in the social studies to meet the needs of all learners would be supportive of teachers' responsibilities and desires to differentiate for diverse learners. And finally, teaching with contested issues. In order to nurture and support students through student-centered inquiry, and in order to support teachers as they navigate instruction around potentially controversial issues, sustained professional learning around pedagogies of deliberation, debate, and discussion would be supportive of teachers and students alike. This also might be an area for broader community professional development, both in learning how to talk across difference, but also its importance and its impact on students' future civic participation.
With the conclusion of the audit, the next phase of our curriculum review cycle, aligned to Policy 2210, is to begin the development phase for social studies programming within the Wauwatosa School District. The development phase starts the response plan to the audit and aims to improve social studies programming and practices across our system. An update on the progress made within the development phase is to come before the Board of Education and the community in fall of 2024. Thank you for your time and attention to this report, and we look forward to further collaboration and conversation on March 11th.